So for this tutorial, we will construct these three kitchen fixtures: the refrigerator, the stove, and the kitchen sink, using all of the commands that we have practiced so far, and if needed, introducing some new ones or possibly introducing some new techniques. Let me go back to my AutoCAD screen here. Launching AutoCAD, go to the Start tab, go to the new dropdown, go ahead and select the AutoCAD template, which is the acad.dwt. If you do not see it listed there, click on Browse Templates, and then go ahead and pick it from that list, and then click Open. From here, type units and enter, and format those units to architectural, precision 1/32 of an inch, keep the angle type at decimal degrees, and the precision to the nearest hundredth of a degree, 0.00, and then click OK. Now it's time to save the drawing file. You can go up to the application button, click on it, hover down here where it indicates Save As, and then click on Drawing. But let me tap my Escape key and show you how I do that via the keyboard. I simply type Save As and enter. From here, place the file in the appropriate location and make sure you name the file according to the instructions. In our case, first initial last name, kitchen fixtures. Go ahead and click Save. And now I will begin drawing my fixtures. I'm going to go back to my example, and it doesn't indicate where to begin, where 00 should be, but I'll go ahead and select the lower right hand, or rather the lower left hand corner of my refrigerator to be that starting point. And I'm looking at my refrigerator, and it's made up of 4 lines, and the overall dimension of the 4 lines that create that rectangle are 2'6" by 2'8". So let me start there. So going back to AutoCAD, I'm going to pan so that I have the UCS icon more or less in the center of the screen. And then I'm going to draw my lines. So I'll type L and enter. Specifying the first point, I will type 0,0 and enter. And I still have polar tracking on from the previous drawing that I completed, and I can keep it this way, or I can come down here, turn off polar tracking, and turn on ortho. Either is fine. I need to draw perfectly straight horizontal and vertical lines, so using ortho or using polar will do. So now what I'd like to do is begin to draw the length, or the width of my refrigerator, and that was going to be 2'6". So I type 2'6" and enter. And it looks like the line is pretty long, but I did not zoom out. So I'll go ahead and do that now. And then I will pan my drawing down. This way I can continue drawing my lines and draw the depth of the refrigerator. And that was 2'8". So I type 2'8" and enter. I bring my line across in this direction. That distance will be 2'6". So I type that in and enter. And then finally, I will type C to close my lines. So this is the depth and the width of the refrigerator. If I go back to the example, I need to represent the door, and that's going to be 2.5 inches. So I'll come back to my drawing, and from here, I can either copy or I can offset that bottom line. I choose to offset, so I'm going to type O and enter. The distance is going to be 2.5 inches, so I simply type in 2.5 and enter. I'm going to select the object, which is this line, and then I'm going to offset it to the top, and I'll click here. I do not want to offset any more lines, so I simply enter, and that terminates the command. So that's the refrigerator. Next to the refrigerator is the stove. You don't have to put them in this order. You can mix them up, and if you prefer, you can go ahead and start with the kitchen sink and then come back to the stove. But in any case, the goal is to draw all three of these fixtures. So I'll keep going from left to right, and stove it is. Now, I'm looking at the stove, and I start by looking at the overall dimensions, 2'6" by 2'4". Just like I did with the refrigerator, I'm going to draw lines that represent the outline of my stove, 2'6" wide by 2'4" deep. So I'll go back to AutoCAD, and I'll pan my drawing over this way, and I'll begin to draw a line. So I'll type L and enter. Now, I'd like the line to more or less be aligned to my refrigerator on the other side. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come down here and make sure that I have object snap tracking on, which it is because it's highlighted in blue. So I'm good there. So with that turned on, and also my object snaps turned on, I'm going to come over here, hover right there at this endpoint. I'm just going to hover and basically then pause. And now I'm going to come over this way. And what it's doing is it's tracking that endpoint, which means that I'm going to stay in line right there. And I'm just going to arbitrarily select a point right here, and I'm going to click like that. And now I'll begin drawing the width of my stove. And this width is going to be 2'6". So I type 2'6" and enter. And now I'm going to take this line up a distance of 2'4". So I type in 2'4" and enter. I'm going to come over in this direction. And I just showed you how to use object tracking. Let me show you how I would use it in this instance. I'm going to take my cursor and I'm going to place it at this endpoint, pause for a moment, and then bring my cursor up slowly. And what it's doing is tracking that endpoint. And all I have to do now is click. So I didn't have to type in the distance. I used object tracking to accomplish my goal. And finally, I will type C to close. So the overall size of the stove is 2'6" by 2'4". Now it's time to work into the dimensions. So I look at the back end of the stove and I have to offset a line by 2 inches. And it looks like on the front end, I offset a line 2 inches as well. And then another line gets offset 4 inch. So let me do that right now. Back to my drawing here. I'm going to type O for offset and enter. The offset distance is going to be 2 inches. So I type 2 and enter. I'm going to select this line. I'll click on it. And I'd like to offset that line down. So I pick a point inside of the stove. So I'm going to click right here. Now I go to the bottom line and I'm going to select that one. I'll click on it. And I'd like to offset that up 2 inches into the stove. So I'm going to click right here. And then I have the other line that needs to be offset 4 inches. And I want to show you while I'm in the middle of my offset command, I'm going to pick this line. I'm going to click on it. And I'd like to offset it up. And it is going to default to 2 inches, but it shows me the 2 inches. And I can change that and I can type in 4. So instead of offsetting it 2 inches, it's going to offset it 4. All I have to do now is enter. And there it is. And now I enter on my keyboard to terminate the command. If you'd like to double check your dimensions, go up to the Utilities panel, click on Measure, bring it down, and you'll see that you have the dimensions that are needed. This is one way to double check. And then if you see the right angles at the four corners, that means that you have 90 degrees, so you can continue. Let me tap the Escape key. The next thing I'd like to do is to get that curved front into my stove. And I'll do that by drawing an arc. So going back to my drawing, I will go to the Draw panel, click on the Arc dropdown, and I can draw a 3-point arc right now. So I'm going to click on that. And I'd like to pick the 3 points, and I have to remind myself that the arc is constructed in a counterclockwise direction. So let's see, I believe I need to pick this point first. So I'll take that endpoint, I'll click on it. And then I come over here and I'll pick the midpoint as my second point. And then I'll pick this endpoint as the third point of the arc. And I have the curve that I want. So now what I'm going to do is take this line and click on it and tap the Delete key on my keyboard. And then I'm going to trim the line segments. So I'm going to type TR and enter. And I'll trim this line segment and this one. And then I can right click and enter to terminate the command. I started working from the outside in, making progress. The next thing I'd like to do is to find the center points of the different circles. So I'm looking at the dimensions, and I'm going to start with the 2 burners that are on the left-hand side. And I can see that I have to offset a line, that vertical line, 5.5 inches over. And then I have to offset the horizontal line 4.5 inches and then bring it down 9 inches. And that's just to establish the center point. And once I'm done establishing the center point, I draw my circles and then I erase the lines that I don't need. Back to the drawing I'll go. From here, I type O for offset and enter. Offset distance, 5.5 inches. So I type in 5.5 and enter. Select the object offset. I'm going to pick this object and I will offset it over to the right and I'll click. While I'm still in this offset command, instead of exiting and then coming back in and typing in a new value, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to pick this line and I'm going to offset it down and I'm going to type in 4.5 and enter. And I'm going to continue. I'm going to pick this line, click on it, indicate the direction to offset, and then type in the value of 9 inches and enter. I'm now done offsetting, so I can go ahead and enter on my keyboard, terminates the command. And then the next thing to do is draw the circles. The drawing indicated the radius was 3.5 inches. So I will go over to my circle drop down and I will select center radius. And I'm going to zoom in so I can see this a little bit better. And I'm going to select this intersection. So I click on it and I'd like to bring it out a distance of 3.5 inches. That's 3.5 inches and I enter. And now I can repeat the circle command to construct the burner down here, or I can copy this circle. And I choose to copy it, but I'm going to show you a couple of ways to copy. So the first one is simply click on the copy command, select the object, enter. And I can specify this intersection as my start point. and I take it down to this intersection as my second point. And then I can right click, enter, and that terminates the command. So that's one way to make a copy. Another way to do it is to select the circle first by clicking on it. I see the grip points. I select this grip point at the center. I give it one click. And now I'm prompted if I'd like to stretch it. And then I look at my command line and I have a copy option there. So I'm going to type C and enter because that's an option I can use right now. And I'm going to make the copy right down here. So I click on it. And now I right click and enter to terminate the command. And then I tap my escape key to make the grips go away. And I have the two burners. Now, before I erase lines, I'm going back to the drawing example. And it makes sense to erase the horizontal lines, but the vertical line, I'm going to offset that one 9 inches. Then I can erase it. And as I look at the drawing, I can see that I should probably also keep one of the horizontal lines because that 4.5 inch offset seems to be in line. I was a little too quick there at first, but I'm glad I checked myself. So I'll go back to the drawing. From here, I can select this line and tap the delete key on my keyboard because I don't need that. And now I will type O for offset and enter. It already has a distance of 9, so I'll take it, I'll enter. I will select this line and offset it 9 inches to the right. And then I right click and enter. Now I can go ahead and select it and delete it. That way I don't see it on the screen and I don't get confused and I can proceed. Next thing to do is draw the circle. I come over here to my circle drop down and I'm going to select center radius. And I'd like this intersection to be the center point. So I click on it. I type in the value of 3 inches now and enter. And I believe now I can select these two lines and tap the delete key on my keyboard. Going back to my example, I have 2 more circles to put in, and I'm going to draw some additional lines and then erase after I put in the necessary circles. So starting with that top smaller circle, I'm going to place that one in there. I have to offset 5.5 inches and then 4 inches. So I type in O for offset, specify the distance of 5.5 and enter. I select this line and I would like to offset it to the left. So I click. I'd like to offset this horizontal line. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to move my cursor down and I'm going to type in 4 and enter. And now I can enter to terminate the command. And I will now go to draw my circle. And this time, instead of going to my icons in the draw panel, I'm going to type C for circle. And then I'm going to enter. And then I'm going to select this as the center point. And it looks like it is defaulting to the radius. So the radius here is going to be 2.5 inches. So I type in 2.5 and enter. It doesn't appear that I need these 2 lines anymore. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to zoom in here, bring this to the center of the screen by panning, and I'm going to construct an implied crossing window so that I can pick the 2 lines. And I'm going to click right here, and then I'm going over to the left. Remember that the implied crossing window is from right to left. anything that crosses through it will be selected. So I click on it. It selects those two lines, and all I have to do is tap the delete key on my keyboard, and they're gone. And I'll zoom back out. I'll take a look at the example, and I will need to offset 8.5 inches in one direction and then 7.5 in the other. So back to the drawing I go. I type O for offset and enter. I'll start with the 8.5 inch offset. So I'll type in 8.5 and enter. I select this line. I offset it over here to the left. And now I'm going to pick the horizontal line. I'm going to select it. And I'm going to put my cursor in the right direction, which is going to be up above. And I'm going to type in the distance because I don't want it to be 8.5. I want it to be 7.5. So I type 7.5 and enter. So this is the intersection where I want my final circle to be drawn. So now I enter to terminate that command. I type C for circle and enter. For the center point, I select the intersection here. And for the radius, I type in 5 and enter. And I'm done. I just need to delete the two lines. So I'm going to use an implied crossing window again. I'll click right here one time, take it over to the left, click on this side. It selects both lines. I tap the delete key, and that is the stove. I'll go back to my drawing. And the next thing that I'm going to draw is the kitchen sink. Once again, I look at the overall dimensions, 1'10" by 2'9". So that's what I'm going to do, is draw the rectangle that has those dimensions. So back to the drawing I go. I'm going to pan over, zoom out a little bit, and this is the area where I'd like to draw the kitchen sink. So to begin, I will type L and enter to draw a line. And I'm going to use my tracking again. As a reminder, I have Object Snap tracking turned on. So before I draw the line, I simply hover here at this endpoint. Endpoint is found. I can now track that endpoint all the way across this way. And I can go ahead and simply click right here. And this allows me to begin drawing the lines. So I've already placed my cursor going up, and this is going to be a distance of 1 foot 10 inches. So I type that value in there and enter. Taking it across, the distance of 2'9". Enter. Bringing it down. I could type in the value, but I'm going to track it. So I'm going to place my cursor right here for a moment, pause, and then bring it over slowly. And it tracks that endpoint. So all I have to do now is click. And then I type C for close and enter. And I have the dimensions that I want. If I check it with my measuring command, there it is. 1'10" by 2'9". All four corners are square. I tap the escape key so I can continue. Looking at my example, I need to offset 2 inches on 3 of the sides and then 4 inches on the other one. I'm going to pan and zoom. So all I have to do is focus on this portion of the drawing. I type O and enter. Specifying the offset distance, typing 2 and enter. And I will offset these 3 lines. And then the last line up here, I'll select it But instead of offsetting it 2 inches towards the bottom, I'm going to now type 4 and enter. And then I can enter again to terminate the command. Back to the example. What I need are rounded corners with a radius of 2 inches. So I'm going to use my fillet command. So from here, I'll type F and enter. The radius is set to 0 feet 0 inches. What I'd like to do is change the radius. So I'm going to type R and enter. I'll specify the fillet radius by typing 2 and enter. And before I select that first object, I want to pick one more option, and that is the multiple option, because I need to fillet 4 corners. So I type M for multiple and enter. And then I can go ahead and pick the lines. 1, 2, again, 1, 2, again, 1, 2, and 1, 2. That was using the multiple option. I can now right-click, enter. That will terminate the command. And now I go back to my example, and I can see that I need to make 2 rectangular shapes, and they're going to be 1 inch apart. And it is safe to assume that it is evenly split down the middle. So going back to my drawing, I'm going to draw a line. So I type L and enter, and I take it from the midpoint to the midpoint. And then I enter to terminate the command. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more and then pan it down. Nope, too far. My apologies. Right there. And I know that it's a 1 inch gap, which means that I can offset 1/2 inch to both sides to achieve that goal. So from here, I type O for offset and enter. The distance is going to be 1/2 inch, and I can type in 1/2 inch like that, or I can type in 1/2 inch like this. Whatever you'd like to do is fine, and then go ahead and enter. I'm going to offset this line. First, I'll go over to my right, so I click, and then offset the line over to my left and click. I can now right click and enter. That terminates the command. And then I'm going to come over here, select this line, tap the delete key, and it goes away. If I use the fillet command right now, so if I type F and enter, it is defaulting to 2 inches. Now watch what happens if I select this line and then this one. Notice how I lose the line segment. So before I fillet, let me undo that. What I'm going to do is trim. So I'm going to type TR and enter. And I'm going to trim this portion of the line here and this portion of the line. I can right click, enter to terminate the command. And now, instead of having one long line, I now have 2 line segments. Now, if I type F for fillet and enter, the radius is 2 inches. I can go ahead and select the first object and then the second object. And I can continue. But you notice I did not select multiple, so it takes me out of the command. And that's okay. I'm going to right click, repeat fillet. This time, before I start picking my objects, I'm going to type M and enter. And I'll select this object and then this one, and I'll continue. And now I can enter to terminate the command. That takes care of the two rectangles with the 2-inch radius corners. And now I'm going to put in the 3 circles that represent the openings where you would be placing the faucet. And I'm looking at the dimensions, and it is safe to assume that the center of the circles along the horizontal is going to be 2 inches from that top line. So I'll start there. And I will type O for offset and enter. Distance is 2, and I enter. Select the line and bring it down, and I click here. And now I can right-click, enter to terminate the command. The example is showing me that the radius is 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to draw the first circle in the middle there. So I'm going to head back to my drawing. And I don't need any extra lines because if I select this one, you can see that I have a midpoint. So I'm going to tap the escape key and I will type C for circle and enter. I select the midpoint as the center point of the circle. So I click and I bring that out. And the distance here, again, you can type it in like this for 3/4 of an inch. Or you can type it in like this for 3/4 of an inch. And then enter. Now that I have that circle in place, I can go ahead and take this line, select it, and hit the delete key. One more look at the example, and the other 2 circles, they are 4 inches away from the center one. So time for me to make a copy. Type CO for copy and enter. Select the object. I select the circle. I do not want to select any more objects, so I enter. The base point, I don't have to pick on any object on my screen. So I'm just going to pick a blank space. Let's see, right about here. So I click, and I'd like to make a copy of that circle. Over to the left, a distance of 4 inches. So I type 4 and enter. And I want to now make a copy on this side, the same distance of 4. So I type 4 and enter. I do not want to make any more copies, so I right-click and enter, and that terminates the command. And now I can zoom out, and I have my 3 objects. So what I'm going to do now is print this drawing. I've been using the keyboard so far, so I'm going to continue. I'm going to type P, R, and it doesn't look like there's a keyboard shortcut, and that's okay. I simply have to type the entire word out. So I type print and enter. And before I hit enter, you'll see print and plot, they're used interchangeably. So typing in print, and let me backspace, or typing in plot will achieve the same results. So I enter, takes me back to the plot dialog box. From here, the printer is going to be the AutoCAD PDF. Printer, sheet size 8.5 by 11. Plotting the extents of my drawing. Centering it. I do not want to fit to paper, so I turn that off. And the scale that I'd like to pick is 3/4 of an inch equals a foot. Nothing else needs to change. I will preview this. I see that I have the message about the annotation scale. Go ahead and click continue. And this is what the drawing will look like printed at 3/4 of an inch scale on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I can right click and go ahead and select plot, but I want to go back and click exit so I can see the dialog box here. And I'm going to apply to layout before I click OK. This way the print settings are saved. And now I click OK. Continue. Make sure to remove model from the end of the file name. So it should just have the same name as your drawing. Go ahead and click Save. Drawing has printed successfully, and this is what it looks like.